The champagne flute slipped from my trembling fingers, shattering against the marble floor of my sister-in-law's pristine kitchen as I stared at the receipt in my other hand. What I didn't know was that this single piece of paper would expose a betrayal so calculated, so cruel, that it would change not just my relationship with my family, but my entire understanding of who I really was. Before I reveal what happened that day, and the shocking discovery that would vindicate me in front of everyone who had ever doubted me, let me tell you how I, Rebecca Chin Morrison, a 36-year-old corporate strategist from Boston, found myself standing in the wreckage of what I thought was my family. The morning had started like any other Saturday in late September. I was reviewing quarterly reports for my consulting firm when my phone buzzed with a notification that would unravel everything. It was a social media post from my sister-in-law Amanda, showing her daughter's baptism celebration in full swing. The gorgeous white and gold decorations, the professional photographer, the elaborate cake. It was everything she had dreamed of for little Emma's special day. Everything I had helped make possible, though apparently I wasn't worthy of witnessing it myself. Have you ever been excluded from a family celebration because someone claimed you were too dramatic, only to discover your absence served a much darker purpose? I'd love to hear about similar experiences, because what I'm about to share might resonate with anyone who's ever felt like the family scapegoat. 3 weeks earlier, Amanda had called me with tears in her voice, explaining how overwhelmed she was planning Emma's baptism. My brother Michael's construction business had hit a rough patch, and they were struggling to afford the kind of celebration they wanted for their first child. As someone who had worked her way up from a middle-class background to running my own successful consulting practice, I understood the pressure of wanting to provide the best for family. Without hesitation, I had transferred $15,000 to her account, money I had saved from a particularly lucrative contract with a tech startup. "Rebecca, you're literally saving Emma's baptism," Amanda had sobbed into the phone. "I promise we'll pay you back as soon as Michael's next project comes through. You're going to be such an important part of this day." Her gratitude felt genuine, her relief palpable. I remember feeling that warm glow of being needed, of being the successful family member who could solve problems with a simple bank transfer. But then came the text message that would haunt me for weeks. "Rebecca, I've been thinking about the baptism, and honestly, I think it's better if you don't come. You know how you can get when you're emotional, and this day needs to be perfect for Emma. I hope you understand." The message arrived on a Thursday evening while I was working late, and I read it 3 times before the words truly sank in. Too dramatic. Too emotional. I, who had built a reputation for calm professionalism in high-stakes corporate negotiations, was being excluded from my niece's baptism because I might cause a scene. Block 1 Sub-Block 1 complete. 2,847 characters. Block 1 Sub-Block 2. I had called Michael immediately, my hands shaking as I dialed his number. My older brother, the golden child who could do no wrong in our parents' eyes, listened to my concerns with what I initially mistook for sympathy. "Look, Becca, you know how stressed Amanda gets with big events," he had said, using the childhood nickname that usually made me feel included. "Maybe it's just better to keep things simple this time. Family only, you know." The irony wasn't lost on me. I was family, but apparently not the right kind of family. Our parents had sided with them, of course. Mom's voice carried that familiar tone of disappointment when I called to discuss the situation. "Rebecca, dear, you do have a tendency to make things about yourself. Maybe this is for the best. You can celebrate with Emma privately later." Dad was more direct as always. "Your brother's got enough on his plate without family drama. Let them have their day in peace." The message was crystal clear. I was the problem, the one who needed to be managed and contained. So I had stayed home that Saturday, nursing my wounded pride with a bottle of wine and trying to focus on work. I told myself I was being mature, that I was taking the high road by not causing conflict. Little did I realize that my absence wasn't about protecting Emma's special day. It was about protecting a secret that would have destroyed Amanda's carefully constructed image if I had been there to witness it. The social media posts started appearing around noon. Photo after photo of the beautiful celebration, the beaming family, the gorgeous venue that looked suspiciously expensive for a couple supposedly struggling financially. I recognized the location immediately. Fairmont Manor, one of Boston's most exclusive event spaces, where basic packages started at $20,000. My $15,000 hadn't just helped with the baptism. It had apparently funded the entire elaborate affair. But it was the final photo that made my blood run cold. Amanda, radiant in a designer dress I knew cost more than most people's monthly rent, holding Emma while cutting into a 3-tiered cake that was clearly custom-made by one of the city's premier bakeries. The caption read, "So grateful we could give our princess the perfect day. Sometimes when you work hard and save every penny, dreams really do come true. #blessed, #baptism day, #worth every penny." What I didn't know was that this post would be the first domino to fall in a chain of revelations that would expose not just Amanda's lies, but a pattern of deception that ran much deeper than I had ever imagined. The secret that would change everything was hidden in plain sight, waiting for the right moment to surface. I had called Michael immediately, my hands shaking as I dialed his number. My older brother, the golden child who could do no wrong in our parents' eyes, listened to my concerns with what I initially mistook for sympathy. "Look, Becca, you know how stressed Amanda gets with big events," he had said, using the childhood nickname that usually made me feel included. "Maybe it's just better to keep things simple this time. Family only, you know." The irony wasn't lost on me. I was family, but apparently not the right kind of family. Our parents had sided with them, of course. Mom's voice carried that familiar tone of disappointment when I called to discuss the situation. "Rebecca, dear, you do have a tendency to make things about yourself. Maybe this is for the best. You can celebrate with Emma privately later." Dad was more direct as always. "Your brother's got enough on his plate without family drama. Let them have their day in peace." The message was crystal clear. I was the problem, the one who needed to be managed and contained. So I had stayed home that Saturday, nursing my wounded pride with a bottle of wine and trying to focus on work. I told myself I was being mature, that I was taking the high road by not causing conflict. Little did I realize that my absence wasn't about protecting Emma's special day. It was about protecting a secret that would have destroyed Amanda's carefully constructed image if I had been there to witness it. The social media posts started appearing around noon. Photo after photo of the beautiful celebration, the beaming family, the gorgeous venue that looked suspiciously expensive for a couple supposedly struggling financially. I recognized the location immediately. Fairmont Manor, one of Boston's most exclusive event spaces, where basic packages started at $20,000. My $15,000 hadn't just helped with the baptism. It had apparently funded the entire elaborate affair. But it was the final photo that made my blood run cold. Amanda, radiant in a designer dress I knew cost more than most people's monthly rent, holding Emma while cutting into a 3-tiered cake that was clearly custom-made by one of the city's premier bakeries. The caption read, "So grateful we could give our princess the perfect day. Sometimes when you work hard and save every penny, dreams really do come true. #blessed, #baptism day, #worth every penny." What I didn't know was that this post would be the first domino to fall in a chain of revelations that would expose not just Amanda's lies, but a pattern of deception that ran much deeper than I had ever imagined. The secret that would change everything was hidden in plain sight, waiting for the right moment to surface. The receipt I discovered 3 days later would become the smoking gun that unraveled everything, but first I need to explain how I found myself in Amanda's kitchen that Tuesday afternoon. My consulting firm had been hired by Whitmore and Associates, a prestigious investment firm, to streamline their client communication systems. It was exactly the kind of high-profile contract that had built my reputation in Boston's competitive business landscape, and I was determined to exceed their expectations despite the emotional turmoil from the weekend. I had been so absorbed in preparing my presentation that I almost missed Amanda's call. "Rebecca, I hate to ask this, but could you swing by the house? I left my laptop charger at the office, and I have this huge project due for my freelance client. Michael's at work, and I'm stuck here with Emma." Her voice carried that same grateful tone from our previous conversation, as if nothing had changed between us. As if she hadn't just excluded me from one of the most important days in my niece's life. Against my better judgment, I agreed. Amanda worked as a freelance graphic designer from home, and I knew how demanding her clients could be. Despite everything, she was still family, and Emma was still my niece. I told myself I was being the bigger person, that this was what mature adults did. They moved past petty conflicts for the sake of family harmony. Amanda's house in suburban Wellesley was a testament to aspirational living. The colonial-style home with its perfectly manicured lawn and luxury cars in the driveway sent a clear message about their priorities. But I knew from Michael's comments about the construction industry downturn that maintaining this lifestyle was putting enormous pressure on their finances. Or so I had believed. When I arrived, Amanda was dealing with a fussy Emma and seemed genuinely frazzled. "You're a lifesaver," she said, giving me a quick hug that felt more perfunctory than affectionate. "The charger should be in the kitchen somewhere. I think I left it near the coffee maker." She disappeared upstairs with the baby, leaving me alone in her spotless kitchen with its granite countertops and high-end appliances. It was while searching through the kitchen island drawers that I found it, a manila folder stuffed with receipts and invoices, clearly Amanda's attempt at organizing the baptism expenses. The folder was labeled Emma's Big Day in Amanda's careful handwriting, and something compelled me to look inside. What I discovered would shatter every assumption I had made about my family's financial situation and my role in Emma's celebration. The first receipt was from Fairmont Manor, $28,500 for venue rental, catering, and service charges. My heart rate spiked as I continued reading. Premium floral arrangements, $3,200. Professional photography and videography, $2,800. Designer cake from Bellacourt Bakery, $1,400. Amanda's dress from Nordstrom, $850. The numbers kept climbing, each receipt representing expenses that far exceeded what any struggling family should be spending on a single event. But it was the payment summary at the bottom of the pile that made my hands shake. Total event cost, $42,750. Payment method, corporate credit account, Hartwell Design Studio. The account holder was listed as Amanda C. Morrison, principal designer. Below that, in smaller print, was a note that would change everything. Client retainer payments from September projects, $47,000. Available credit, $65,000. Amanda wasn't struggling financially. She wasn't a small-time freelance designer scraping by between projects. She was running a successful design studio with major corporate clients and had more than enough money to pay for Emma's baptism 10 times over. My $15,000 hadn't saved the celebration. It had been completely unnecessary, just extra padding for someone who was already living comfortably. Little did I realize that this discovery was only the beginning. The folder contained something else that would prove Amanda's deception ran much deeper than simple financial dishonesty. Hidden beneath the baptism receipts was a printed email exchange between Amanda and my mother, dated just 2 days before I had been uninvited to the baptism. The subject line read, "Rebecca situation, need to discuss strategy." The email trail revealed a conversation that would haunt me for months. Amanda had written, "I think it's better if Rebecca doesn't come on Saturday. She's been asking too many questions about our finances, and I'm worried she might figure out about the business. You know how she gets when she thinks someone's being dishonest." My mother's response was equally damning. "You're right to be cautious. Rebecca has always been too nosy for her own good. Michael agrees it's better to keep things simple. We'll handle her if she makes a fuss." What I didn't know was that this email exchange was part of a much larger pattern of family discussions about me. Conversations where I was consistently portrayed as the problem that needed to be managed, contained, and excluded. The secret that would change everything wasn't just about money. It was about a systematic campaign to diminish my role in the family while simultaneously benefiting from my generosity. The confrontation I had been avoiding became inevitable the moment I photographed those receipts with my phone. Standing in Amanda's pristine kitchen, surrounded by evidence of her elaborate deception, I felt something shift inside me. The careful diplomacy I had cultivated in my professional life, the willingness to smooth over family conflicts for the sake of peace, all of it crumbled in the face of such calculated betrayal. Before I reveal the chain of events that would lead to my ultimate vindication, I need to explain how this discovery triggered the first real fight our family had experienced in years. Amanda's footsteps on the stairs gave me just enough time to close the folder and compose myself. When she entered the kitchen, Emma balanced on her hip. I was standing by the coffee maker with her laptop charger in my hand. "Found it," I said, my voice steady despite the turmoil churning in my chest. She smiled that same grateful smile, completely unaware that I had just uncovered the truth about her successful design business and the unnecessary nature of my financial contribution. "You're the best, Rebecca. I don't know what I'd do without you." The words felt like salt in an open wound. I managed to maintain pleasant conversation for another few minutes, discussing Emma's sleeping schedule and Michael's latest construction project, all while the receipts I had photographed burned like acid in my mind. It wasn't until I was driving home that the full magnitude of her deception truly hit me. That evening I called Michael directly. My brother and I had always had a complicated relationship. He was the favored son, the one who followed Dad into construction, the one who produced the first grandchild and maintained the family's traditional values. But beneath the sibling rivalry, I had always believed there was genuine affection between us. That belief was about to be thoroughly tested. "Michael, we need to talk about Emma's baptism expenses," I began, my voice carefully controlled. "I discovered some information today that's very concerning." I explained what I had found in Amanda's kitchen, reading him the specific dollar amounts and payment details. The silence on the other end of the line stretched long enough that I wondered if the call had dropped. When Michael finally spoke, his voice carried a defensive edge I had never heard before. "Rebecca, you went through Amanda's private papers. What the hell is wrong with you?" The accusation hit like a physical blow. I had expected denial, maybe even embarrassment, but I hadn't anticipated being painted as the villain for discovering their deception. "Michael, she lied to me. She took $15,000 from me under false pretenses while running a successful business. And then she excluded me from the baptism to keep me from finding out the truth." My voice was rising despite my efforts to remain calm. "How is any of this acceptable to you? Look, maybe Amanda didn't tell you about every aspect of her business, but that doesn't mean she was lying. Things are complicated right now with the economy and everything. Just because she had one good month doesn't mean we're rolling in money." His explanations felt rehearsed, as if he had been preparing for this conversation. The real blow came when he continued. "And honestly, Rebecca, this is exactly why Amanda was worried about having you at the baptism. You make everything about yourself. You turn every family event into some kind of drama where you're the victim. Maybe it's time you looked at your own behavior instead of blaming everyone else." The words landed with devastating precision because they echoed criticisms I had heard my entire life. Too emotional, too dramatic, too focused on herself. The same phrases that had been used to dismiss my concerns, minimize my achievements, and justify my exclusion from family decisions. What I didn't know was that these weren't spontaneous reactions to my behavior. They were talking points that had been discussed and refined in family conversations I wasn't part of. After hanging up on Michael, I spent the night reviewing every family interaction from the past 5 years, looking for patterns I had previously missed. The times my professional successes were downplayed or ignored. The way my opinions were dismissed during family discussions. The subtle ways I was made to feel like an outsider at family gatherings, despite being the one who often paid for dinner or brought the most expensive gifts. Little did I realize that my late-night analysis was preparing me for revelations that would extend far beyond Amanda's baptism deception. The secret that would change everything was still waiting to be discovered, hidden in a place I would never have thought to look. But first, I would have to survive the family meeting that Michael arranged for the following Sunday, a gathering that would either resolve our conflict or destroy what remained of our relationships forever. The family meeting that Michael arranged took place at our parents' house in Brookline, the same colonial where we had grown up and where every major family decision had been made for the past 30 years. I arrived on Sunday afternoon with a folder containing printed copies of every receipt I had photographed, determined to present my case with the same methodical approach I used in corporate negotiations. What I didn't anticipate was walking into what felt less like a family discussion, and more like an intervention designed to put me in my place. Mom had prepared her famous pot roast, the same meal she made for every important family gathering, but the familiar comfort of the dining room felt strained and artificial. Dad sat at the head of the table in his usual spot, his expression already set in the disapproving lines I remembered from childhood lectures. Michael and Amanda flanked him on one side, presenting a united front, while I sat alone on the other side with my evidence folder like a prosecutor preparing to present a case to a hostile jury. "Before we start," Dad announced in his authoritative voice, "I want everyone to remember that we're family here. We don't air our dirty laundry or make accusations that can't be taken back." His eyes fixed on me as he spoke, and the message was unmistakable. I was the one who needed to be warned about appropriate behavior. I began by laying out the financial evidence methodically, explaining the discrepancy between Amanda's claims of financial struggle and the reality of her successful design business. I presented the receipts showing the true cost of Emma's baptism, and the payment records proving she had more than enough money to cover the expenses without my contribution. Throughout my presentation, I maintained the calm, professional tone that had served me well in countless business meetings. Amanda's response was a masterclass in manipulation. Tears began flowing before I had finished speaking, and her voice trembled with what appeared to be genuine hurt. "I can't believe you went through my private papers, Rebecca. I trusted you in my home, and you violated that trust. Yes, I have some good clients right now, but you don't understand how unpredictable freelance work can be. I was terrified about making such a big financial commitment for Emma's baptism." Michael immediately moved to comfort his wife, his arm protectively around her shoulders as he glared at me across the table. "This is exactly what we were worried about, Rebecca. You're attacking Amanda on one of the most stressful days of her life, making her feel guilty for trying to give our daughter a beautiful baptism. This obsession with money and who spent what, it's not healthy." Mom's disappointment was palpable as she shook her head. "Rebecca, honey, I raised you to be more compassionate than this. Amanda was trying to do something special for Emma, and instead of celebrating your niece's milestone, you're picking apart receipts like some kind of accountant. This isn't who we are as a family." But it was Dad's words that cut the deepest. "You know what your problem is, Rebecca? You think because you make good money, everyone else should bow down to you. You think you can buy your way into being important, but money doesn't make you better than your brother or his wife. Maybe if you spent less time counting dollars and more time building real relationships, you wouldn't feel so left out all the time." The accusation stung because it contained just enough truth to be devastating. I had used my financial success as a way to prove my worth to a family that had always valued Michael's traditional path over my corporate achievements. But what they were describing wasn't generosity. It was desperation disguised as success. What I didn't know was that this conversation was being carefully steered toward a conclusion that had been predetermined before I ever walked through the door. The secret that would change everything was hidden in the very dynamic playing out around that dinner table, but I was too focused on defending myself to recognize the pattern that had defined my entire relationship with my family. Little did I realize that Amanda's tears and Michael's protective anger were part of a performance they had perfected over years of similar family gatherings. The real revelation wouldn't come from the baptism receipts or the design business. It would come from a source I had never considered, someone who had been watching these family dynamics with growing discomfort and was finally ready to break their silence. As the meeting concluded with my parents' firm instruction to apologize to Amanda and put this whole mess behind us, I felt the familiar weight of family expectations crushing down on my shoulders. But this time something was different. This time I wasn't willing to swallow my pride and pretend everything was fine for the sake of family harmony. The breaking point came 3 days after the disastrous family meeting, when I received a call that would shatter the last vestiges of my faith in my family's integrity. It was my cousin Jessica, Dad's brother's daughter, calling from her home in Portland where she worked as a financial advisor. Jessica and I had never been particularly close. She was 5 years younger and had always seemed more interested in maintaining family peace than questioning family dynamics. But what she told me during that 40-minute phone conversation would expose a pattern of deception that reached back years. Rebecca, I've been wrestling with this since Sunday's family meeting, Jessica began, her voice tight with nervous energy. Mom told me what happened, and I can't stay quiet anymore. There are things about your family's finances that you don't know. Things that make Amanda's baptism situation look like small potatoes. She paused, and I could hear her children playing in the background, a reminder of the normal family life that seemed increasingly elusive in my own experience. What Jessica revealed over the next half hour would fundamentally alter my understanding of every family interaction from the past decade. According to her, Amanda and Michael had been presenting themselves as financially struggling to multiple family members for years, collecting loans and emergency funds that were never repaid. My $15,000 wasn't an isolated incident. It was part of a systematic pattern of financial manipulation that had targeted different relatives for different amounts over time. Last Christmas, they told Uncle Robert that Michael's business was failing and they might lose the house, Jessica explained. He gave them $8,000. The summer before that, they convinced Grandma Miller that Emma needed surgery and insurance wouldn't cover it. She gave them $12,000 from her retirement fund. Each revelation felt like a physical blow, painting a picture of calculated deception that extended far beyond my own experience. But the most devastating information was yet to come. Jessica had access to financial records through her work that revealed the true scope of Amanda's design business. Hartwell Design Studio wasn't just successful, it was thriving, with annual revenues exceeding $300,000 and a client list that included several Fortune 500 companies. Michael's construction business, far from struggling, had secured 3 major municipal contracts in the past year alone. Rebecca, they're not just comfortable, they're wealthy. They bought a vacation property in Cape Cod last year that they're keeping secret from the family. Amanda drives a BMW that cost more than most people make in a year. And the worst part, they laugh about it. Mom overheard Amanda at a family barbecue last summer, joking with Michael about how easy it is to get money from relatives who think they're helping out. The revelation that my generosity had been a source of amusement rather than gratitude was devastating enough. But Jessica wasn't finished. There's something else, and this is the part that made me finally decide to call you. The reason you were really excluded from the baptism wasn't because you're dramatic or emotional. It was because Amanda was terrified you would ask too many questions about the expenses and figure out their financial situation. She had been right to be terrified. My background in corporate consulting had given me exactly the skills needed to uncover their deception, and Amanda had recognized the threat I represented to their carefully constructed facade. The exclusion from Emma's baptism hadn't been about protecting a special day. It had been about protecting a lucrative scam. But Jessica saved the most shocking revelation for last. Rebecca, your parents know. They've known about Amanda and Michael's real financial situation for at least 2 years. Mom found out when she saw Amanda's tax returns. She does their bookkeeping, remember? They all decided it was easier to keep letting family members think Michael and Amanda were struggling than to deal with the awkward questions about why they had been taking money under false pretenses. The conspiracy extended beyond just my brother and sister-in-law. My own parents, the people who had raised me to value honesty and integrity, were active participants in a deception that had cost family members tens of thousands of dollars. They had watched me transfer $15,000 to Amanda while knowing it was completely unnecessary, and they had supported my exclusion from Emma's baptism to protect the very people who were defrauding our family. What I didn't know was that this revelation would trigger a series of events that would expose not just the financial deception, but a much deeper pattern of family dysfunction that had been carefully hidden beneath a facade of middle-class respectability. The secret that would change everything was about to surface, but first I would have to navigate the most challenging confrontation of my life, one that would either destroy my family completely or force them to finally acknowledge the truth they had been hiding for years. Little did I realize that Jessica's call was just the beginning, and that the evidence she had uncovered would pale in comparison to what I would discover when I finally decided to fight back with every resource at my disposal. The week following Jessica's devastating phone call became a period of methodical preparation that would determine whether I approached this situation as an emotional family member, or as the strategic consultant I had trained myself to be. What I didn't realize was that this preparation phase would uncover additional evidence so damning that it would transform my planned confrontation from a family intervention into something resembling a corporate fraud investigation. David Chen's preliminary report had arrived via encrypted email on a Thursday morning, and I spent my lunch break in my locked office reviewing financial documents that painted an even more disturbing picture than Jessica had described. The systematic nature of Amanda and Michael's deception was breathtaking in its scope and sophistication. They hadn't simply lied about their current financial status. They had created an entirely fictional narrative about their economic struggles that had been maintained for nearly 4 years. The timeline David had constructed showed that their family financing strategy had begun shortly after Emma's birth, when they realized that new parenthood provided the perfect cover for requesting financial assistance. The first victim had been my father's elderly Aunt Martha, who had contributed $5,000 for unexpected medical bills related to Emma's delivery. From there, the requests had escalated in both frequency and amount, always timed to coincide with major family gatherings where emotional manipulation would be most effective. But it was the documentation of their actual lifestyle that provided the most infuriating contrast to their sob stories. David had uncovered credit card statements showing expenditures that revealed a level of casual luxury that exceeded even my own comfortable lifestyle. Amanda's monthly shopping expenses alone averaged $3,000, including regular purchases at Nordstrom, Saks, and boutique stores that catered to Boston's wealthy elite. Michael's business expenses included golf memberships at 2 exclusive country clubs and quarterly trips to Las Vegas that cost more per weekend than most families spent on vacation in an entire year. The real estate holdings were even more extensive than Jessica had indicated. Beyond the Cape Cod property, they owned a rental duplex in Cambridge that generated $6,000 monthly income and had recently purchased a vacation condo in Miami that they were using for tax write-off purposes while enjoying personal vacations there quarterly. The total value of their real estate portfolio exceeded $2.3 million, making them among the wealthiest members of our extended family while simultaneously portraying themselves as the most financially vulnerable. The most damaging evidence came from Amanda's digital footprint, which David had analyzed with forensic thoroughness. Her business social media accounts told a completely different story than her personal family communications. On LinkedIn, she positioned herself as a successful entrepreneur who had bootstrapped her design studio from startup to 6-figure success. Her professional Instagram showcased a portfolio of high-end corporate clients, luxury office space in Boston's financial district, and team photos with the 5 full-time employees she had hired over the past 18 months. The disconnect between her professional persona and her family narrative was staggering. While telling relatives about financial struggles and requesting emergency loans, she was simultaneously posting about business expansion, new equipment purchases, and celebrating revenue milestones that placed her design studio among the top 10% of similar businesses in Massachusetts. Her most recent professional post, dated just 2 weeks before Emma's baptism, celebrated signing a $150,000 contract with a Fortune 500 company for a comprehensive rebranding project. David's investigation had also uncovered the sophisticated methods they used to compartmentalize their deception. Amanda maintained separate email accounts, social media profiles, and even different versions of their family story depending on their audience. The version told to elderly relatives emphasized medical expenses and economic uncertainty. The version shared with peers focused on cash flow challenges and business investment needs. The version presented to their accountant reflected their true financial situation for tax purposes. The most disturbing discovery was a digital folder on Amanda's business laptop titled Family Strategy Notes, which David had accessed through his professional network connections. The folder contained detailed profiles of various family members, including their estimated net worth, their emotional triggers for financial generosity, and specific approaches that had proven successful in obtaining money from each individual. My own profile was particularly extensive, noting my guilt about family success disparities, and tendency to overcompensate with financial gifts when feeling excluded. But the evidence that would prove most valuable in my eventual confrontation was a series of text message exchanges between Amanda and Michael from the months leading up to Emma's baptism. The messages revealed their detailed planning around excluding me from the celebration, with specific discussions about the risk I posed to their financial deception. "Rebecca asks too many questions," Amanda had texted. "If she sees the venue and photographer, she'll start calculating costs and figure out we didn't need her money." Michael's response was equally damning. "Mom says we should just tell her she's too dramatic for a church event. Rebecca always believes she's the problem when the family says so." The text exchanges continued with discussions about how to manage other family members' potential questions, which relatives might be good targets for future financial requests, and specific strategies for maintaining their struggling family narrative even while enjoying their wealth. Most shocking was their casual discussion of my grandmother's retirement fund contribution, with Amanda texting, "Poor Grandma Miller actually thinks Emma was sick. She's been calling weekly to check on the baby's recovery. Should we tell her the surgery went well? LOL." What I didn't know was that these text messages would become the emotional centerpiece of my confrontation, providing evidence not just of financial fraud but of the cruel psychological manipulation they had inflicted on elderly family members who genuinely cared about Emma's well-being. The secret that would change everything wasn't just about money. It was about the systematic exploitation of family love and trust for personal financial gain. Little did I realize that this comprehensive evidence would give me the power to orchestrate the most complete and public vindication of my concerns that I could have imagined, transforming me from the family troublemaker into the person who had finally exposed a fraud that had been hiding in plain sight for years. The decision to hire a private investigator came to me during a sleepless night spent staring at the ceiling of my Beacon Hill apartment, wrestling with the magnitude of what Jessica had revealed. If my family had been systematically deceiving relatives about their financial situation for years, I needed to understand the full scope of their operation before deciding how to proceed. What I didn't anticipate was that the investigation would uncover evidence so damning that it would give me the leverage I needed to finally expose the truth in the most public way possible. David Chen, no relation despite sharing my married surname, was a former FBI agent who specialized in financial fraud investigations. His downtown Boston office was modest but professional, and his reputation for thoroughness had been recommended by several colleagues in the consulting world. When I explained the situation, his expression remained carefully neutral, though I caught a flicker of interest when I mentioned the systematic targeting of elderly family members. "What you're describing sounds like organized fraud," David said, pulling out a yellow legal pad to take notes. "If they're deliberately misrepresenting their financial situation to obtain money from relatives, especially elderly relatives, that could constitute criminal fraud under Massachusetts law. The question is whether you want to pursue this through legal channels or handle it privately within the family." I opted for a comprehensive investigation that would give me options. Within a week, David had compiled a dossier that was both more extensive and more damning than I had imagined possible. The financial records alone painted a picture of extraordinary deception. Amanda's design business had generated over $1.2 million in revenue over the past 3 years, while Michael's construction company had secured municipal contracts worth nearly $2 million during the same period. But the personal details were what truly shocked me. The Cape Cod property Jessica had mentioned was actually a $850,000 waterfront home in Chatham, purchased with cash and hidden under a trust to avoid family detection. Amanda's BMW was just one of 3 luxury vehicles registered to their various business entities. They had taken family members for over $200,000 in emergency loans, while simultaneously building an investment portfolio that included rental properties and a substantial stock portfolio. The most devastating evidence came from social media analysis and digital records that David had accessed through his professional networks. Amanda maintained separate Instagram and Facebook accounts under her business name, documenting a lifestyle of luxury travel, expensive restaurants, and designer purchases that directly contradicted the struggling family narrative she presented to relatives. The photos showed vacations to Napa Valley, weekend trips to New York's finest hotels, and shopping sprees that cost more than most families' monthly budgets. But it was the recorded phone conversation that would become my nuclear option. David had discovered that Amanda regularly participated in online forums for small business owners, where she had been recorded during a virtual networking event discussing her family financing strategy. In her own words, captured in a video that she thought was private, Amanda explained how she and Michael had developed a system for extracting money from relatives by carefully managing the family's perception of their financial struggles. The key is being selective about what information you share and with whom. Amanda's voice was clearly audible on the recording. My mother-in-law does our books, so she knows our real situation, but we make sure the siblings and extended family only see what we want them to see. It's amazing how generous people become when they think they're helping family members in crisis. The recording continued with Amanda laughing about specific family members who had provided money, including a detailed discussion of how they had convinced my grandmother to drain part of her retirement account for Emma's supposed medical emergency. The best part is that once they give you money, they become invested in maintaining the fiction that you needed help. Nobody wants to admit they were fooled, so they keep supporting the story even when evidence suggests otherwise. What I didn't know was that this recording would become the centerpiece of the most satisfying vindication I had ever experienced. The secret that would change everything wasn't just about money or deception. It was about the systematic way my family had gaslit and manipulated not just me, but multiple relatives, while positioning themselves as the victims whenever anyone questioned their behavior. Little did I realize that David's investigation had uncovered one final piece of evidence that would make my eventual confrontation completely devastating. Tax records showing that Amanda and Michael had been claiming their family loans as business deductions, essentially using their fraud proceeds to reduce their tax burden while the victims received no documentation that might allow them to claim their losses. Armed with this comprehensive evidence, I finally had the power to expose the truth in a way that would be impossible for my family to deny, dismiss, or rationalize away. The moment of truth arrived 3 weeks later, at what was supposed to be a routine family dinner celebrating Dad's 65th birthday. I had accepted Mom's invitation with carefully concealed anticipation, knowing that this gathering would provide the perfect opportunity to reveal everything I had discovered. What my family didn't realize was that I had spent weeks meticulously planning this confrontation, ensuring that every piece of evidence would be presented in a way that would make denial impossible and escape humiliating. The dinner was held at Meridian Restaurant in downtown Boston, an upscale establishment that Dad had always favored for special occasions. The entire family was present. My parents, Michael and Amanda with baby Emma, Jessica and her husband who had driven down from Portland, Uncle Robert and Aunt Linda, and even Grandma Miller, who rarely made it to evening events anymore. It was the largest family gathering we'd had in months, which made it perfect for what I had planned. I waited until after the main course had been served, and everyone was relaxed from the wine before making my move. Standing with my glass raised as if to offer a birthday toast, I smiled at the assembled family members who had no idea what was coming. Before we celebrate Dad's birthday, I'd like to share something that I think everyone at this table should know about. The first bombshell was Amanda's recorded voice playing from my phone, crystal clear in the quiet restaurant as she described her family financing strategy to her business networking group. The blood drained from Amanda's face as her own words filled the space. It's amazing how generous people become when they think they're helping family members in crisis. That recording was made 6 months ago, I announced to the stunned table. While Amanda was telling all of us about their financial struggles and collecting emergency loans from multiple family members, I placed printed copies of the financial records on the table, showing the true scope of their wealth. Hartwell Design Studio has generated over $1.2 million in the past 3 years. Michael's construction company has municipal contracts worth nearly $2 million. The silence that followed was deafening. Amanda's tears were immediate and dramatic, but this time they carried none of the sympathy they had garnered at previous family meetings. Uncle Robert, whose $8,000 emergency loan had been mentioned specifically in the recording, slowly put down his wine glass and stared at Michael with undisguised fury. "You told me you were going to lose your house," he said, his voice deadly quiet. Grandma Miller's reaction was the most heartbreaking. At 82, she had been convinced to drain $12,000 from her retirement account for Emma's fictional medical emergency. "I ate generic cereal for 6 months to help with that surgery," she whispered, her voice shaking with a combination of hurt and rage. "I worried every day about that baby's health, and it was all lies." But it was my parents' response that provided the most satisfying vindication. Mom attempted to maintain her usual role as family peacekeeper, but the evidence was too overwhelming to dismiss or rationalize. Maybe there's been some misunderstanding, she began weakly, but her words were cut off when I placed the tax records on the table showing how Amanda and Michael had claimed their fraudulent loans as business deductions. There's no misunderstanding, Mom. You've known about their real financial situation for 2 years. You do their bookkeeping. You watched me transfer $15,000 to Amanda while knowing she didn't need it, and you supported excluding me from Emma's baptism to protect their deception. The accusation hung in the air like smoke, impossible to ignore or explain away. Dad's face had turned an alarming shade of red, but for once his anger wasn't directed at me. Michael, what the hell have you two been doing? The disappointment in his voice was devastating, carrying the weight of a lifetime of preferential treatment that had just been revealed as completely misplaced. The final blow came when I revealed the Cape Cod property, the luxury vehicles, and the investment portfolio that proved their wealth exceeded that of everyone else at the table combined. You've been living like millionaires while telling your family you were struggling to pay bills, I said, my voice carrying the satisfaction of someone who had finally, definitively, been proven right. And the most disgusting part is that you made me feel guilty for questioning your honesty. Michael's attempt at explanation, something about business expenses and cash flow, was met with stony silence from the entire table. Amanda's sobs were now openly ignored, no longer capable of generating the sympathy that had protected her for years. The family dynamic that had positioned me as the dramatic troublemaker had been completely shattered, replaced by the undeniable truth that I had been the only one honest enough to ask the questions that needed to be asked. The aftermath of that birthday dinner unfolded with a swiftness that surprised even me. Within 48 hours, Uncle Robert had consulted with his attorney about recovering his $8,000, and Grandma Miller's eldest son, my Uncle Frank, had become involved to protect her interests. The family WhatsApp group, usually filled with cheerful updates and shared photos, became a war zone of accusations and demands for accountability. What I didn't anticipate was how quickly the family would reorganize itself around the truth I had revealed, or how profoundly this would change my role within the family structure. Michael and Amanda's response was predictably defensive. They issued a joint statement to the family claiming that their business success was recent and uncertain, that they had genuinely felt financially vulnerable when requesting help, and that my corporate investigation tactics were an inappropriate violation of family privacy. But their explanations rang hollow against the mountain of evidence, particularly Amanda's recorded voice describing their systematic manipulation of family members. 3 months later, the family landscape had completely transformed. Michael and Amanda's marriage was reportedly under strain, with Amanda's design business suffering as word of their ethical issues spread through Boston's tight-knit professional community. They had been forced to sell the Cape Cod property and liquidate part of their investment portfolio to fund the family repayments, a financial consequence that felt particularly satisfying given how carefully they had hidden their wealth. My relationship with my parents required extensive rebuilding, but for the first time, our conversations included genuine acknowledgement of how my perspective had been consistently dismissed and undervalued. Dad's apology, when it finally came, was brief but sincere. "Rebecca, I owe you an apology. We should have listened to you instead of assuming you were being dramatic. You were the only one asking the right questions." The most unexpected development was my evolving relationship with Emma. Despite everything that had happened between her parents and me, I was determined not to let their actions affect my connection with my niece. When Amanda, swallowing considerable pride, asked if I would be willing to maintain a relationship with Emma, I agreed, but on terms that acknowledged the new family dynamic and my unwillingness to pretend the past hadn't happened. My consulting practice has thrived in the aftermath, partly because the experience taught me to trust my instincts about financial irregularities and partly because word spread about my investigative skills. Several clients have specifically sought my services after hearing about my family situation, recognizing that someone who could uncover complex deception within their own family might be exactly what their businesses needed. The most profound change has been internal. I no longer apologize for asking difficult questions or requesting transparency in financial matters. The label of dramatic that had been used to dismiss my concerns for years, has been replaced by a reputation for thorough analysis and unwillingness to accept explanations that don't match the evidence. Looking back now, I realize that the baptism exclusion was the best thing that could have happened to me. If I had attended that celebration, I might never have discovered the receipts that led to everything else. Sometimes being excluded from something you wanted to be part of opens your eyes to truths you never would have seen otherwise. Have you ever discovered that your family's perception of you was based more on their need to maintain comfortable illusions than on who you actually are? Sometimes the most painful revelations lead to the most necessary changes, and I'd love to hear from others who have found strength in standing up for truth, even when it meant standing alone.